Okay. Brittany LeBaron.
Leah Mon.
Holly Mortensen. Okay, so the first question was asking us about our impressions of the CRC article and video by the United Nations, and then about the article and videos by Parental Rights.
Okay. Go ahead.
Oh, I thought the videos, well, at least the CRC video, like, put a really positive spin on it, and then after I read the articles, I was like, oh, like, I don't know, I didn't catch all the things that would happen, if um, that treaty or whatever was signed by the United States. So I don't know. After I watched it, I was like, oh yeah, and then after I read the stuff, I was like, oh no, I don't really like it, So that's what I thought. But
I think there's a lot of good things in it, and then it's mixed with the bad, and it's disappointing. I wish they could like break it up and just do like a treaty with just the good things in it. And I think I also kind of understand where they're coming from. I don't know, the thought that I had when studying about this was obviously I'm not for the treaty the way it is now, but there are situations where like parents are abusive or things like that, and like the government needs to step in and provide a way for kids to get help and to have like a regular life, and if it's too much parental rights driven, if that's even really possible, then those who are in really broken homes, which is a lot more of the population is becoming part of a broken home, then these kids don't have a chance to um, live their life because their parents, aren't involved or aren't giving them, what they need.
I'd have to agree. I think what stood out to me is you're sitting there and you go, oh, that's absolutely terrible that they're trying to take parents' rights away from religion or this, and this. Then I thought back and I thought, you know what? These people aren't trying to be bad. They're, in my opinion, they're trying to help. But
Right.
there are good parents that they're losing their rights. And so I think that's a lot of government problems is where do you take rights away and where do you give rights and how do you define them? Because if there's a terrible parent, then yeah, it is kind of good to have the government step in. But on the other hand, as a parent who cares, I don't want to lose my rights and my privileges as a parent and let the government raise my kid because we don't, we know best. And so I see that they had a good heart, but I do see where it could be very dangerous.
Right. Well, and speaking of you just brought up religion, and I just remembered this. A couple years ago, I don't know how long ago, but I followed the story. There was a story somewhere in the East Coast about a family who um, um, failed to provide medical care to their child based on religion, and their child died. And I don't remember, like, it was a long time ago, but I don't remember the specifics, but that brought up the whole conversation of, like, rights and how, when does the government step in and say, no, you have to provide this medical care. And it was something like a life-saving surgery or something like that, and the child wanted it, but they relied on God to heal the kid, and they're like, well, God will heal it. We don't need this medicine, so I'm not going to let them do the surgery. So in situations like that, I feel like that's the motivation behind movements like what we're seeing with taking away the rights. So I wish it's hard. It's hard to find the balance.
Yeah, it's kind of sad that it has to be just like so strict and I don't know. Yeah, like you said, not a balance.
Yeah.
Okay. Should we move on to the next question?
Sure.
So this one is obviously we're not from a country where the CRC has been ratified. So, and It just says research another country to document the positive and negative effects and relate how they could benefit or hurt your country with the future CRC ratification. I researched Ghana,
Okay.
and it was a good idea. Like, it had a positive outlook, but there were a lot of problems because of their values and their culture. And one article I read, it said that the agencies like child welfare or whatever, for example, they didn't receive adequate notification violations of children's rights. So then they couldn't like go in and help. And a lot of it talked about that there wasn't enough training for the people in those agencies working with the children. And so basically just structural and work process barriers, and that the community didn't really know a whole lot, and so they were kind of left out. So that's, it didn't really, I don't know, this article just made it seem like it hasn't really worked that good, but with positive intentions. So that's what I got from my research.
Yeah. That's good. I didn't actually research a country because I didn't read that one. I guess I skipped it.
That's okay.
It seemed like when I looked at them, I kind of felt like they weren't really, kind of interesting, they weren't really being held up to the standard that they're supposed to be, but then I think that gets really scary because you see they could come in and get in trouble, you know, so it's like they're not understanding the rules, but then they're bound to them, you know, so that's kind of like I got an overview looking at those, you know, and that's kind of how I felt looking at.
Yeah. Well, from what I have understood about this treaty is that it seems really hard to obey to their standards. I feel like their standards aren't realistic. And so it doesn't surprise me to hear that there's a lot of countries who have ratified it but haven't, you know, actually lived up to a T of what they're doing, and that is scary because they have major consequences like funding. Videos talk about like humanitarian funding, and that's wrong. You shouldn't take humanitarian funding away unless it's like a terrorist or something, you know? Horrible.
Yeah. Okay, the next question. How did Kelly's presentation help your understanding of the ecological approach to family advocacy? He wants to start.
So was Kelly's presentation, she was the one that was the advocate for the family.
Yeah.
Like okay, so she's the one that talked about going and people not understanding the CRC. Is that correct? I can't remember her name.
I guess so.
Okay.
Right.
I thought that one was really inspiring. Like when I watched it, it made me want to get up and move. Like I do something. You know, and I felt like she did show that it really, really connects. Like everything that happens connects every part of society. You know, kind of like the video that they showed what stays in Vegas, you know, happens in Vegas. It's not at all like that. You know, and so she kind of showed that these rules and these laws are affecting our society, and if we ratify it, would start to change. You know, change the way family is and the way they're able to, you know, respond.
You know, I really thought about the part of her presentation where she talked about how she wrote an email to Costa Vida about that video, and they took it down. And I don't know, I think this is a tool that Satan uses, and one of the reasons why people who are for the family stay so quiet. I really believe that people who believe in traditional family values are the majority. They just don't say anything, or they're not participating as heavily as the, you know, the other side, the opposing side. And so for a different class, not this one, I have these things called Let Your Voice Be Heard letters, and they require 4 letters for the semester that we send to some place. And one is due tomorrow for me, and so I was thinking about, well, what do I want to write? And she made me think about, like, movies. And And it made me feel really inspired that like this could actually like make a difference. I guess I haven't felt like sending a letter will really get much attention because people get so many letters. So like I decided to write to ESPN. I watch a lot of sports and my family watches a lot of sports, and more we're seeing a lot of like sexualized commercials, right? And it's really unfortunate because that's not what like sports are about. And now they're connecting sports with sexy women and like inappropriate things. And so I wrote a letter to them and I said, look, you know, you have the power to refuse to air these commercials because you have enough money to do that. And if you do that, the corporations will stop making them because they'll want you to air what they make.
Yeah.
Um, so I sent that, and hopefully, I don't know, it was inspiring to me too. That just one thing like that, it took me like, you know, maybe 10 minutes to write. If we do things like that, we can really make a big difference, and it doesn't take much. I feel like a lot of people don't realize that.
Mhm. Like that, and that made me think of like that. If you just wrote a letter, like maybe it wouldn't do anything, but if a whole bunch of people wrote about the same thing to the same person, like how that would be, you know, like maybe they would listen if a whole bunch of people had the same message for them instead of, you know, just one. I don't know. That's kind of what I thought of.
Okay, Holly, is that your baby? A girl up there?
Yeah, but she's way bigger than that.
Oh my gosh, cutest kid ever.
Thanks.
How old is she now?
She's 2.5.
Okay, just side note.
Yeah. Oh, thanks. Okay, should we move on?
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Okay, 2 more questions. What system or level do you personally feel would be the most difficult to advocate, and why?
It's the macro system that was the government, right? I think that's the most difficult to advocate for myself anyway, that I feel like there's so many voices out there that like mine doesn't gain a lot of attention. And with the people who are in office, it's really unfortunate. I don't know how they get elected. I don't vote for them, but there are people who are elected who make these policies. And when I feel like with the government, we become so partisan that they stop thinking about, okay, in this situation, what is the right thing for the country? Instead, they think about, why did I get elected and what's going to get me elected again, and what does my party want, and I'm not going to compromise, and so nothing gets done. And it's hard to advocate in a system like that because they're so set in their party lines, they're not willing to look at like the bigger picture.
I agree with you that's the hardest. I feel like we're the smallest in that system, you know, like, so it's hard to let them hear us.
Right.
You hear what we're saying?
Yeah, same with me. It's like you're one of how many? You know, if you're advocating in a family or a community, your odds are, you know, a lot better. You're a bigger person.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and that makes me realize though about how important it is to understand how these systems interact, because we can work from the bottom up instead of just going straight to the top and trying to work down. And I think it's more effective if you understand the system and start from the bottom going up, because then you gain numbers and experience and a voice and attention.
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, our last question is, what system or level do you personally feel is the most important to advocate, and why?
That's hard. I think all of them interact a certain way.
I
don't know.
I think microsystems and mesosystems, because like I don't know. I just thought that the relationships and everything connect each other, and then they impact the child more directly and the most. I don't know. That's what I thought.
Yeah, I think the microsystem, I agree with that. The microsystem holds a lot of power, and it's coming under a lot of attack too. And so
Yeah.
I think it's important to kind of pull in a little bit and kind of, I guess, go on the defensive and start defending it on that kind of a level of one family at a time.
I also think too, like the kids are most involved with the smaller systems. Like they're
Yeah.
involved with the family and they're involved with the school and the community. Like they're seeing that now. The higher ones and the government are affecting them, but as a young child, they're most involved in the smaller systems. And so I think that's where you can have a lot of power to make a big influence. And that's
Right. Well, and I think there's opportunity for a lot of correction in the microsystem. So let's say, as well, actually, we've kind of already seen this, that, the government and the schools are going the wrong direction. They're not in alignment with what the parents want to teach, So, although, sorry. I'll just continue.
Okay.
Although, the child doesn't see that, it's important that the family has the opportunity to correct what they're teaching. I guess that if worse comes to worse and there's nothing we can do, what we can do is when that child comes home, we can say, oh, what did you learn today? And then you can say, okay, well, here's what I think about that, because they're more likely to listen to us than the school anyway. So I think it really comes down to being very involved in your child's life and knowing what they're hearing. And, unfortunately, if it's not what you want them to be hearing, you have the opportunity to correct that in your home.
Yeah. That goes a lot along with the threat that I've been researching. I'm researching about sex education in schools. And so, yeah, they're totally going the opposite direction that parents and LDS, and other members of other faiths too, that are trying to teach their kids. And so it's just important for parents to be involved in their kids' lives and know what's going on at school and be open and
Right, I agree.
And it's hard because I feel like the world is telling parents, oh, just let your kids do whatever they want. Don't restrict them. Don't monitor them. And so it's hard to all these voices.
I was thinking about this. So my husband's parents, they're teachers and they're great people and they're members and I overheard his dad talking to him once about schools and funding, and he said, people expect these schools to raise their kids for them, and I think what we're seeing with things like sex education and these movements, it's a reaction to parents failing at their jobs. And I think, unfortunately, they're doing it the wrong way, but they're doing it out of a feeling that somebody has to do something, and these parents are not involved. And so they need to know something about sex. So what do we, so then they're left to decide what they tell. So I think the bottom line and the foundation of this problem is that parents need to be a lot more involved. They need to be advocates for their own family, and they need to not expect the outside world to raise them. And I think that these problems we're seeing are more of a reaction than a cause.
That makes sense to me. Okay, that's all the questions. Does someone want to summarize really fast?
Yes. You want me to do it?
Sure, go for it.
Okay. I think that as we kind of reviewed and talked about the CRC and noticing about the United Nations and side and also the parents' rights, that parents do need to be involved, and that these organizations are trying to take it out of the parents' hands because the parents aren't doing it, but it gets very dangerous for those parents that are wanting to be good parents. Also, we discussed the different ecological systems, and that we felt like the smaller the system, the the more successful we would be in being an advocate for the family and for children. And I think that's it.
Yeah.
Okay, we hit